If the only tool you have is a hammer, you tend to see every problem as a nail. Abraham Maslow. What Maslow meant by the hammer is the power of education. Education has the power to solve most problems in the world today. Part of our duty towards our society is increasing the sharing of knowledge that we have learned, experienced, or collected. Aspire is a new dialogue program that invites guests from various educational backgrounds who kindly share their stories and advice to help our new generations to live a good life. Education is for improving the lives of others and for leaving your community and world better than you found it. Marian Wright Edelman. It is highly appreciated that we have speakers who want to increase the knowledge of parents in order to ensure that our kids grow up in a safe environment. As well as educating youth, increasing the knowledge of parents is one of the best ways to ensure that our kids grow up in a safe environment. This program discusses issues that are important for people in various fields of interest. Aspire is presented by doctoral student Madi Alakloubi.
Good morning, everyone. This is Mahdi Alakloubi from Aspire Show podcast. Please welcome Bimi Aknopoi.
Thank you.
So first of all, thank you for your service to UNICEF to protect children. And with over 2 decades of work experience with UNICEF on child protection, you went through emotional moments and tough decisions making. And how did you find your professional journey with UNICEF?
Thank you, Madi. It's a big honor to advocate for child protection after retiring from UNICEF over 2 decades. I served 22 years exactly,
Yes.
and I retired in 2019.
Yeah.
Early retirement, I would say. Anyway, for my professional career in UNICEF, one of the key things is that I had a foundation working with government for over a decade. Working with the national government, I come originally from Nigeria, and I worked with the federal ministry, where I actually developed a lot of professional skills because we were working under the International Labour Organization. Then after about 13 years there, I actually moved on to an employers organization under ILO again, before finally I moved to the journey on child protection in UNICEF. And when I came in, it was directly based on the skills I was bringing in on project management, as well as ability to work with children in difficult circumstances. So for me, it has been a beautiful career because professionally, there is a lot of support you have and appreciation of the accomplishments that you make. In Nigeria, one of the key things I remember was working on child trafficking, on children institutionalized, as well as child labor. So we had a lot of regional support. We had laws that were passed, policies that were established with the support of the government.
Right.
And we do a lot of intersectoral work because you can't do child protection to protect children from violence, abuse, and exploitation. You have to work with different ministries.
Right.
So that really helped. And I transitioned from national to international, and that's created a bigger scope to actually promote the work on child protection globally. So I worked in New York for years, and then I was transferred to Eritrea, I was transferred to Turkey. I mean, in and out, that's the way the job is. But one thing I took away is when you get into the system, you just have to swim or sink, in the sense that the tasks are just there, and you have to use all the skills you bring in to work on the best interests of children. And that was how we thrived as a team at national level, at international level, to ensure that we focus on the best interest in the area of policies, research, resource mobilization. It was all encompassing, just to ensure that children are protected from abuse, neglect.
Right.
Thank you.
So UNICEF works in more than 150 countries to protect children from violence, exploitation, and abuse. How do you determine children at risk of abuse? I mean, what strategies did you use to promote child protection across different countries where you have worked?
Thank you. The first thing I usually negotiate with government is to understand the concept of child protection.
Wow, that's hard work.
Because every country wants to protect their children.
Right.
So when you come in with the idea of child protection, sometimes you might meet a barrier because they have to understand and appreciate that children are always in protective environment, but some of them drop out of that protective environment. Your kids, my kids, parents are there, the family is there, the community. It takes a village to raise a child from where I come from, but also it takes a global village to ensure child protection. So for us to identify children that are outside the protective circle, it takes, one, a bit of research, analysis, field observation, not just remotely, even we have to be present right there. Yeah. And gradually you realize that children that are not within the family protection are vulnerable to abuse. Oh. Children that are nameless, many children, I mean, right now we have a population from the UNFPA of about 8 billion people. And out of that, 25% of them are under 14, 0 to 14. But children, if you look at up to 18, they will be about 30%. Okay. Most of them live in developing countries where they are exposed to a lot of abuse. Oh. So what we try to do is we look at assessment on harmful practices in child protection, because we have health as well, we have nutrition, we have access to water and sanitation, we have education in UNICEF, different programs. But the program for child protection in particular, we look at what are the harmful practices that children are exposed to. You will protect your child from harmful practice. I will also, but there are some children that don't have caretakers, that they're exposed to vulnerability. So we look at that. We look at children that are institutionalized and what access do they have to even justice system. Then we look at the issues around exploitation, child labor, trafficking of children, recruitment of children into armed conflicts. And that is even expanding right now, and UNICEF is doing all its best because of all the challenges we are going through. So when we look at that kind of data, it exposes us to know what we can cope with, and it's different in each country. Your country may be different from mine. Right. It's different in Canada. So Canada has its own challenges, despite the fact that there are a lot of great things that has been done. So we have to do that assessment. Yeah. And based on that, we design the program, implement the program, mobilize resources, and then we take things from there.
So children must be protected everywhere. But there is a really enemy for children these days, which is online violence. So children face much violence every day on social media platforms. How does UNICEF respond to online violence to protect children around the world?
Just before this meeting, I had a consultation with one of our experts that has been working. She's left UNICEF now, but she's been working on child online violence. And the increase is becoming disturbing to so many stakeholders. So there is a lot of boundaries that have not been created. So what UNICEF does, because more children in developing countries and developed countries are now, particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic,
Right.
it
Yes.
was even higher. So from my discussion, because it's not my major area, and what I realize is that UNICEF is working in the area of the political support, economic support, in the area of even the technology support. So there is a lot, and I will highlight three things. The first thing is building partnership with national governments and civil society to ensure that there is awareness. Parents are aware, individuals, companies, schools, all of us together, even the law enforcement. And then engaging community networks themselves. Because if you don't work with the communities that are like, I'm based in a particular region, and if that region it's restricted to a lot of online challenges, you still have to work, because children, they know how to tap into various resources. There is not much, you can't control everything. And then we try to also ensure that there is partnership with private organizations that are managing technology devices to block websites that are actually not in the best interest of children, because there is a lot of grooming, there is a lot of, before you know it, bullying. And this, sometimes kids don't report. So parents have to be aware and spend more quality time with their children so that children can discuss with them, report the issue before it's escalated. So it's like all together we will have to work with parents, with schools, with the service, basic social services sector, and also the justice system. So UNICEF is looking at it globally and also trying to establish, I just learned recently that we are trying to establish a special day in the year to ensure online safety for children.
Wow, that's
and
good news.
hopefully, maybe next year we will have more information. I'm retired now, so I know there is a lot of initiatives that are going on, and I know my colleagues in UNICEF, if you have an opportunity to speak with the child protection director at the headquarters, you can also have a lot of knowledge.
Right.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that kids don't report abuse, and I would like to add something, that there is a child welfare agency everywhere that can be connected by the public 24 hours a day. So if anyone notices something wrong with any children, please, we encourage them to call the agency immediately.
And hotline access can be available, because that's one of the things that when children know that this is available for them, so there is more awareness to be created, even for children. You're right.
So when I did my research about this episode, I read something that made me sad. It says, for many children in some countries, violence comes at the hand of the people they trust, like their parents, caregivers, or neighbors. And this is from UNICEF website that published in 2020, September 24. Your comment, please.
That is a fact. The reason is because many times children are scared of strangers, but they become more vulnerable to people they trust. And you have reports of even incest in the family. You have reports of relatives, trusted relatives that have abused children, both boys and girls. And the issue is also the taboo. There are sometimes cultural taboos of discussing self-care, issues around sex, and issues around puberty for children. And because that is also some limitations, some children are not even aware of how to protect themselves or how to refuse this kind of molestation. So what has been going on is, one, education, awareness, and also building a protective safety net for children, because mothers are working, fathers are working, and it's gotten to a point that you leave children in the hands of caretakers that we have not sometimes, because back here in Canada, you have to do a kind of police vulnerability check before you work with kids. But in many developing countries, we don't. And because of that, sometimes these children are exposed to people that are actually abusers and perpetrators. So one of the things that we have done, and when I was in UNICEF, one of the things I did was to make sure we work on parenting. We work with schools, and then we work with the justice system, because when you abuse a child and there is no consequence, it's reinforced. Right. So when you work with the justice system to ensure that you have laws, policies that are enforced, not just policy on papers, because I've worked in countries that you have excellent policies on paper, but implementation is zero. So it has to be both at that age, and then monitoring is underreported. That's the problem we're facing. Right. So it's important that we work collectively with all the stakeholders to ensure that children are protected.
Yeah, good. Yeah. So let's talk about creating safe environment for children. Some young or newcomers' parents think that social workers can just take their children away, or they are just for bad parents. What would you advise families and the newcomers to ensure child welfare?
The first and most important thing is that we all want to, I said it at the beginning, we all want to protect our children. Right. We all want the best for our children. Yes. But when you move to a new country, for example in Canada, the socialization process is different from where I come from. Right. The children are socialized in this environment. And for me, I came with 4 children. And it was a bit challenging. I have to be very practical. But I learned on time, based on also my work with UNICEF, that engagement with young people, understanding the young people, participation and involving them on decisions based on their imagined capacity, on decisions that will affect them, can help. And then I made my children my friends, because there are rules, there are policies, there are services set in place for children here in Canada. There are standards. And if you don't meet those standards, you have resources to be trained. You have resources for support. And you have to understand that. For example, corporal punishment, it's something that it's not acceptable. Yes. And even in schools, it's not acceptable. Yes, there are consequences. I work in the school environment. There are consequences for bad behavior and involvement of parents. But it comes to a point that parents have to understand the Canadian system. Canada signed the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and while they are still in the process of achieving all at 100%, there is a lot that has been done. There is multicultural environment here in Canada, and so if you enforce your kind of cultural discipline that is termed as abusive, you get into trouble. Social workers are not there to take your children away. It's just to assess that the best interest of the children are in place. I have a granddaughter, and my daughter will say, "Mom, I have to do A, B, C." The nurses will come home. The A will be done, B will be done, all the vaccination, everything has to be in place. She has to do that. You can't keep your kids in the car and then go for shopping. We've had a lot of cases where children are suffocated and because of carelessness, and we have lost so many children. road injuries are there, you have to be careful. You have to train the kids.
Yeah.
You can't just expose. So we have to work together. The social workers here in Canada they investigate what happens when cases are reported, and as much as we absorb cultural diversity, we have to keep in line with the laws, the standards that are there to protect the best interests of children. And we have to learn and adjust and adapt as parents. And that helped me. So my children are very independent.
Good.
They will tell you what they want to do, and you have to guide them. If I say, they will ask me, is it a command? I said, it's a good advice, and I think you have to think about it.
Right.
So children have their parents have their obligations that we have to meet, and I think helping parents and training them and guiding them will be a big asset. But please be assured that social workers are not there to take away our children. They are there to provide the best interest for the development, the total development of the children.
So, dear Bimi, let's wrap up this amazing interview with this question. Based on your work experience with children with special needs in and out of UNICEF, what are some of the missing gaps to be addressed by stakeholders?
There's a lot that government still needs to do, because these are countries that have ratified the Convention on People with Disabilities. And one basic thing is a lot of services sometimes come as charity, not as the rights of people with disabilities. While there is a lot of support that I've observed and is appreciated, I think there are three basic things that, as an advocate, that I will suggest based on my readings and findings. The first thing is the monitoring mechanisms. The strategy, you can have a strategy in place, very good strategy, but is it implemented? Is it monitored? Is it supported with resources?
Yeah.
If that is not available, no matter how beautiful the strategy is, you find out that there is no implementation. Then the second thing is engagement with people living with disabilities or caregivers. Many times people call them handicapped, but if you work closely with people with disabilities, they have different, how can I define it? They have
Humanity.
different gifts.
Oh, yes.
Like I have children that have developmental disabilities, but just put them in the music environment, they would thrive. Put them in artwork, they
Yes.
thrive. Give them assistive devices for communication. Use sign language, they would thrive. So there is no awareness about that. And so because of that, there's a lot of stigmatization still going on. Then another thing I want to emphasize is employment. We have children with autistic challenges that are very functional. And as they graduate from school, employment opportunities are very limited. So there is need for partnership with private organizations, with government, and government needs also to provide a kind of any motivation, any budgetary support to help them accommodate people with disabilities, because they need employment to have independent
And they
living.
deserve it.
And they deserve it.
Yeah.
It's part of the convention and part of their rights.
Yeah.
So that's an area that we are building up so that as graduates, as young graduates, they are engaged, and it requires a lot of advocacy. Another thing I observe here in Canada is that there is more work we need to do with communities, indigenous communities. While there is a lot of support in the cities, in the rural areas it's not as solid as we have in the, like in the school where I work now, there is a lot of support, there is a lot of care, there is monitoring, reporting, which is good, but it's not the same in rural communities. The same in my country, where I'm now a Canadian, so a Nigerian Canadian. So same in Nigeria, same here. So we have to ensure that we work with all stakeholders, and government needs a lot to do.
Right.
The families to be respected, education support to be provided, and collectively, if we work with the health ministry to make sure the health facilities are there for them, education. They need access, and their caregivers, like parents, need a lot of support. Is the home environment accessible? Is everything available for them? Is communication there? So if we work together, there is still a lot to be done. It's progressive, and I think with this global support and advocacy going on, awareness going on, we can move on this journey.
So the bottom line is, and this is for adults, you don't have to prove that a child has been abused to report abuse. Trust your feelings and say something, report anything that is not okay with children. Because children protection is everyone's business.
That's a good one. Yeah. And the final word I always say is, when a child is abused, there is a lot of shame.
Right. Exactly.
And if you don't believe them, it's even like a double abuse. Mm-hmm. So always, as you said, let's focus on the best interests of the child in every action that we take. And I think collectively we can do better.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.